What's up, guys? It's Robert from Existence First. And as you can see, I have a makeshift setup today. I'm in a bit of a hurry. I have to drive down to LA, but I really wanted to share this piece with you. This four-part model comes from the book Crucial Conversations. So let me go through this as they present it, and then I'm going to add a couple pieces of my own that are really going to help with emotional awareness. So first, let's go through this model. Anytime you act, presumably it's because you feel a certain feeling. And most of the time you think that feeling comes from seeing or hearing something in your environment. But in actuality, it usually comes from telling a story, telling yourself a story about what you saw or heard. So for example, I'll give an example of my own here that's not in the book. Let's say you're driving down the road, somebody cuts you off. That's what you see. The story you tell yourself is, dang, that person is really rude. Feeling, you get angry. Action, maybe you give the middle finger. I don't know. But let's look at another possible situation. Let's say right after they cut you off, they then turned into the entrance of a hospital. That's what you see. Now the story changes. Now they're no longer a rude person. They are a person in a really serious emergency. Your feeling changes. You start to feel bad for them. Geez, I hope they're okay. And then your action changes. You might say, oh, sorry for the finger. All right, but you get the idea. So that's the model. If you want to learn more about it, go visit Chapter 6 in Crucial Conversations. But for now, let me make a few points of my own because I applied this to my life this week and had some huge insights. First, let me say that I think that most people spend their attention on this pairing, right? The story and the feeling. And if you listen to people for throughout a day or maybe even a week, notice what they say and how they present it, and you'll probably notice that a lot of the things you hear are statements like, I'm so angry at him, he's irresponsible. And then you say, well, why is that? Well, because he borrowed something from me, and it's been weeks since he hasn't given it back. Okay, so that part is the fact. The friend borrowed something. The story is, because they haven't given it back, they're irresponsible or they're a bad friend or this or that. The feeling is, now I'm angry. And usually it stops right there. Usually there's no action. And that's the problem, okay? Because most people live in these two blocks. And what's the problem there? Because as a feeling, that is at the receiving end of this cause and effect relationship, right? Now you are at the effect of the world. And you see this with a lot of people. They'll say, yeah, I'm so angry at, that the world is this way, or that there's bombings all over the world, right? And then they come up with this story about the world is a bad place, and then that produces a feeling. And if it stops there, that is pure victimhood. All right. The other pairing. Let me get to that in a second, because I'm also reminded of this story. Well, it's a research study in the topic of learned helplessness. And learned helplessness, I believe, was proposed initially by the psychologist Martin Seligman. So if you want to learn more about it, look up Martin Seligman. But let me just talk about one study that I remember. And this study takes place in a lab with a floor and a small wall. This side of the floor is capable of delivering a mild electric shock. This side of the floor is not. So what they would do, the researchers would put like a dog on this side of the floor and deliver this electric shock, which is mild but painful enough that it would be unpleasant. That inevitably caused the dogs to jump over the wall. So then what the researchers did was put a wall that was too high to jump over, and then a few trials of delivering the shock. Of course, the dog is frustrated and wants to jump over, but there's nothing it can do. Then they remove that extra part of the wall, so it is once again a short wall, and they deliver the electric shock. And what happens? The dog just stands there. You would ask, or you would wonder, why doesn't the dog jump over the wall? It's fully capable of it. And the answer is that the dog learned to be helpless. It learned that there's nothing it can do to solve that pain of the floor. So I want you to think about your childhood and your adolescence and ask yourself, was there ever a time where you were taught or told that there was nothing you can do about the situation you were in? That would be a very dangerous place to be in, because then you start to tell stories. And you can imagine the dog's mind probably is not capable of very elaborate stories, but the human mind is. And the human mind all the time makes up stories about being a bad person or being not good enough. By the way, this is why although I was really interested in personality a few years ago, I really do not pay much attention to it anymore. And why is that? Because personality theory is like a story. Like if you're going to say, oh, well, I'm an introvert, or I'm this type, or I'm the unorganized type, or I'm the artistic type, that's a story, and it's going to just cause certain feelings and then no action. Similarly, if you are in a situation where you learn to be helpless, then you start to tell a story, right? You start to say, well, and you start to work backwards. Well, the only reason I would be in this crappy situation is if I'm a bad person, or I'm dumb, or I'm incapable, or whatever, right? So sometimes we work backwards. So that's it's all kind of negative, I guess. But so let's talk about what is the path out. How about this? Let me propose this alternative. Instead of placing our attention here on this pairing, why don't we put our attention here? And this may remind you of my last video on how to get out of depression. The answer I gave was you see or treat your feeling, whether it's sadness or low mood or whatever, you treat your feeling as a cue to act. You treat it as a cue to act. That's the reason the dog didn't jump over the wall. It didn't see the feeling, the pain, as a cue to jump over the wall. You need to see your feeling as a cue to act. If you feel bad, go change something about it. Right? Now this pairing is where all your attention should go. The pairing here is where most people's attention goes. And remember, I said that here's the cause and here's the effect. So most people, the feeling is the end point. That's the end of the story. Whereas this is the beginning of, I guess, the not the story, but you get what I mean. So what we're going to do is focus here, and now the feeling becomes the beginning of the story, the beginning of the movie or whatever, and the action is what comes second. So no longer is your feeling the end point. It's now the beginning point for acting. And that right there is the path from misery to freedom. This is Robert Nelson, and remember to always put your existence first.